Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. Here with me, Mike Phillips. As you know, each week I have an amazing guest on from all different verticals of business. We talk to business managers, we talk to team leaders, we talk to entrepreneurs, we talk to solopreneurs, we talk to serial business badasses, which I think I've got a really good guest for you today. Today is no different. We're bringing on Emily Purry. She's a keynote speaker, a corporate trainer, a consultant. She helps companies to organize and create more welcoming and inclusive spaces. Part of the reason for that, Emily is a legally blind athlete, and so she brings her lived experiences to her keynotes, her signature keynotes, has a little bit of lightheartedness, and she holds a master's degree in business management and a bachelor's in psychology. So I am stoked to have a conversation with Emily today. And here we are with Emily Purry on the Leadership Toolkit. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So if you would take just a couple of minutes, I'm really glad you're here too. I'm really appreciative. If you would take just a couple of minutes and share with the audience kind of who you are, what is your background, where did you come up, how did you get into business, leading yourself, doing consulting. I'm just interested to hear a little bit more about you and what it is that you do, Emily.
Absolutely. Well, I am, and just for all of you out there, a white female. I'm 43, putting my age out there already. And I really started this journey back in about 2015, and it really started with diversity, equity, inclusion. My family in itself is very diverse. We have multiple disabilities in my family. From myself as a person who's legally blind, and I have Stargardt's macular degeneration. My brother also has the same condition, and I noticed that disability was often not being talked about and how uncomfortable people felt talking about disability. And so that set me down on the path of how do I bring this into the fold of diversity, equity, inclusion? How do I get people to understand my experience as a person with a disability? And how do I help people normalize the conversation and become more comfortable with it? And so I ended up leaving the government job. I don't know if that was a mistake or not. I'm still trying to figure that out. And started my own business doing consulting, training, and keynote speaking. And really my goal in all of that was to help other people not experience the world like I have and like I do. As a person with a disability, it's rough. It's people don't understand our lives, our abilities, our inabilities, and how to interact with us at the most basic human level. And so it became my goal to help, hopefully myself and others being the big piece of, feeling more comfortable in this world because of the people around us being educated. So that's kind of that path. And yeah, I'm an athlete. I was a soccer and a javelin thrower in college.
Okay.
Yes, a legally blind soccer player and javelin thrower. It will make sense later. But and now I have really found a passion in surfing. It's one of the sports I don't have to use my sight for as long as I have a coach. And so that's been super fun and a big passion of mine in my, my 40s, really. So.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. I love the, if I can ask a question, one of the things that is hard, because like you all have a different experience than certainly I will, is, when you were talking about, hey, let's start these conversations when it comes to disabilities. I was sharing beforehand, I have a fond memories of an employee. He worked for me, good friend of mine, similar condition. And as we were talking about that, it's one of those things that it seems often people that are in the position that have the disability, like yourself, Emily, are way more comfortable talking about that and bringing up that conversation than somebody that's not in that situation, right? So, I mean, for lack of a better term, you correct me if I'm wrong, but like for someone like myself, I'm also in my 40s, barely, but I'm still there. But it's like, okay, so I'm quote unquote normal or not, I don't have something like that. Where do you start? Do if when you're going into business, we do want, people to feel comfortable and accepted and confident in where and how they're working. Where do you start with some of those conversations when you go into a business and that's what you're talking about? how do you start that conversation? How do you advise management to have those conversations?
Absolutely. Well, management is a little trickier, like when you're actually the employer, it's a little
Sure.
trickier. But if somebody has disclosed that they have a disability, that makes it a lot easier. And at that point, you ask the questions that are applicable to whatever situation you're in. So if it's, Emily, what's the best way I can send you documents because I'm your coworker, we're going to be working together. You don't have to address the whole spectrum of everything of my vision. What is applicable to your situation? That's number one. Otherwise, the best piece of advice, and it sounds super simple and people almost get offended when I say it, is get to know the human. I am so much more than my disability,
Right.
but because that gives people a point of context of my life, that's what they hold on to. Or if they see my guide dog, they're like, oh my gosh, your dog's so beautiful. And they talk about my dog because it's something they can immediately grasp onto. Whereas if you notice somebody has a disability, you're still going to ask the same questions that you would any other human. How was your weekend? What's your family life like? And as you get to know that human, most likely they will talk about their disability because it's part of them, it's normal to them, but it's not the first thing you need to know about them.
Sure.
And that's the piece that people get so stuck on. They're like, oh my gosh, I need to ask these questions. I want them to feel included. No, being human and not straying away from the disability. It's not that. It's just getting to know the human. And I'll be like, yeah, I would love to go to happy hour with you. Is there any way I could get a ride? Because I don't drive. And then you're like, okay, she doesn't drive.
Sure.
That's a piece of her disability that now I know because somebody asked me to go to happy hour, just like any other coworker or situation. So it's really addressing the questions that are necessary to know in the moment and then going from there.
So I mean, definitely what I'm hearing you say is it's certainly more the humanity piece. I mean, so often I think we, again, just as humans, we compartmentalize these different spaces, and it's like it's really no different, right? Other than and we were talking beforehand, my friend Neil, that it was one of those things. I always knew he'd be to work on time because his dad drove him, and so it was that situation where, and his dad's older generation, so it was one of those things that it was like that timeliness was important to him, and so as you go through that, it's one of those that it. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just, you have to have those conversations. You have to be willing to have the conversations, right?
Yeah. And you can't be, so like what I said, when it gets more tricky with employers, as far
Sure.
as like, if you're noticing things and they haven't disclosed disabilities, then we have to be mindful of the ADA. But the ADA has done amazing things for us as people with disabilities. And it has silenced a lot of the conversations because people are too scared to even have the conversation.
Oh,
And so
absolutely.
it's, yes, we have to abide, we have to be compliant as employers and as in workplaces, and we can still talk about things, we can still ask questions if somebody has disclosed their disability, and then if they haven't, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, it's not something we need to be scared of all the time.
Sure.
It's just another human difference.
I think that's the key right there. When you said just there, hey, it's just another human difference. We're all unique. Every single person is unique. So I want to ask a question. So going back, because you said, hey, I was doing soccer and javelin in college. Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's not getting too personal, did you have this condition in college? And so you had to navigate those sports, or was this something that came on later? How did that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is, I've had it since I was a kid, and a lot of people have macular degeneration. It's age related.
Okay.
So many listeners might have had it, heard of it in their grandparents, etc. But Stargardt's macular degeneration is a specific type, and it's typically, you're born with it, and it's progressive. So
Right.
when I was a kid, I remember being able to read street signs. I can remember, I drove cars in high school that I wasn't legally allowed to because I could see well enough. I shouldn't have been doing it, but whatever.
But it was back then. It's okay now.
It's okay now. Yeah. So It's progressive. It's definitely progressive. In college, I could still read textbooks. It was super, super close, but I could still read textbooks. Now I can't read any print really without magnification, without, my CCTV. So in college, I stopped soccer. I forfeited my senior year because
Oh man.
I could see the ball when I needed to, but I couldn't quite get behind it. I couldn't get under the header. I could see the ball coming at me, but I couldn't align things correctly. I could see the ball coming to my feet, but I couldn't get my foot in the right place. So the game had changed for sure, compared to high school and early college. Javelin doesn't really require sight, which is great.
Interesting.
Because as long as your body's doing the right things, and as long as you can learn to feel your body, you're going to throw it the right way. I could tell a good throw versus a bad throw, regardless of what it actually looked like, because I couldn't see it. Once it left my hand, I couldn't see it.
Sure.
And so that didn't require sight. The referees, however, did not like me trying to fetch my javelin when other javelins were coming at me.
Sure.
They got really mad when they found that out, for sure.
So I'm curious. So it's interesting because as you're explaining that, and I think that's one of the things that, that we lean into on this show when we're talking about leaders and leadership. The first thing, and we talked about this just briefly beforehand, like one of the first people you have to be able to lead is to lead yourself. And when you're talking about this, just kind of going back to the college athlete days, and you're saying, okay, well, hey, I had these, different cues. So you had to be able to listen to what's the muscle movement? What's the how many steps do I take?
Yeah.
Right. And so how did that transition? So you moved from, or how would you say that transitioned into like your business life? Because you completed, you ended up getting a master's in business management.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things you might take from those college athlete days into business? What would you say are some similarities and some things that you brought with you from those experiences?
Oof. I think the thing, and it might not be from my college days, that comes to mind immediately, and I think it's applicable to all of us in one sense or another, is self-acceptance. And accepting my disability, it's not just a one-time thing for me because the progression is happening. So I can accept that I have a disability, but as I lose my sight, there's things I can no longer do. And accepting that on a fairly regular basis, like I don't notice day-to-day losses of my sight, but definitely thinking back to year, I do remember, like I said, I remember being able to read street signs. I remember being able to read textbooks. I remember those things. And so it's this constant acceptance of where I'm at now, what exists now versus what's, looking back can be really depressing. Looking forward can be really anxiety producing, because what if I lose my sight completely? What if I can't see this? What if, like, I really have to try and stay present, and prepare the best I can. And I think that's really relevant for a business, in that we know that what's happening now, we can forecast as much as we want. And it's important to forecast. I don't want to say we don't.
Sure.
But we also have to be ready for constant change. We also have to accept that really none of us have a clue what's going to happen at any given time. The pandemic taught us that. The political climate that we're in and have been in, and just the polarization that's happened in the political world, like, we really don't know what's going to happen. And so just being flexible enough, still maintaining my work ethic, still trying to stay motivated when things are really freaking hard, really uncertain, and just doing your best, I think, are all things that sports have taught me, for sure.
Sure.
You go out and you have the best intentions of having a fantastic game, and you suck it up big time. Like, it just happens. Surfing is also teaching me that.
Yeah.
Because the waves are even more uncertain than the soccer ball or the ground.
Yeah. Well, you don't have any
out
control
there on the surface, but that is a washing machine underneath, and no one knows it till you get out there. So, yeah, it's it's a good metaphor for life for sure.
So one of the interesting things, so I picked up on a couple of things. One, and I think this is really important for anybody in any leadership role, whether you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, managing yourself, and all the way up to if you're managing thousands of people. There's three things I picked up on.
Hmm.
One is that self-acceptance. You have to be accepting and happy with where you are right now in the moment, not where you think you're going, not where you were. But I think that's a pretty powerful statement, Emily. The other thing that you brought up is you said you have to be willing to be flexible, and you got to lean on your work ethic. And I think that's something, it's easy, generationally, I find myself now managing more millennials or Gen Z and so
Yeah.
forth. And we have a difference. I was talking with a friend of mine on the show not long ago. His name also is Mike. And we were talking about, because he works in AI and he manages, we'll call it kids younger than him,
Yeah.
right? And they're business professionals, but compared to, when it comes to age, and he's talking about the work ethic is totally different. Like somebody like yourself or myself, it's like, okay, well, hey, this job has to get done. And so we just put our head down and that's the direction we go.
Yep.
Whereas the newer generation, and take heart of this, take note of this, people that are listening to the show, is when you are managing generationally, I think it's important not just to have the work ethic, but the why behind the work ethic. People want to know why they're doing something. Is that a fair statement, Emily?
I think so. Yeah. The motivation's definitely different. And our generation criticizes it a lot. But if we're going to be leaders, we have to acknowledge it and be emotionally intelligent enough to see where they're coming from, or we're going to be out of it for sure.
So
and we're not the first generation to think that we're all, the younger folks are, people in their 70s and 80s were looking at all of us saying, wow, these people are lazy, or they're this or they're that. I don't know what we were known for.
These guys are a bunch of hippies and pot smoking crazy,
Yeah. So it's a generational norm, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. So I got a couple questions. One thing that I'm curious of, actually, I'll go back to that in just a minute. Something you just said is we got to be emotionally intelligent enough to understand that. Can you help? Because I think that's the emotional intelligence is a word. It's a, it's one of those, so it can become a buzzword, if you will, right? People go, oh, you got to be emotionally intelligent. When you're saying that, can you help define that a little bit? What do you mean when you're saying, hey, we got to be emotionally intelligent enough to be able to see that coming at us in your perspective?
In my perspective, I think the biggest thing is looking at self. I think our generation has very much gotten caught up in the ego. Ooh. And I'm the CEO and I'm the president and I'm this and I'm that. And being able to get out of that ego and understand where that ego comes from. Why are we so insistent on having that title and those things and the material things to prove that? And I think being able to step back from that and really define and understand what's important, how to emotionally connect with people without that ego, how to accept yourself without all those things or with all those things, and really be able to define who and what you are and want to be. And then being able to read and understand other people in that same capacity. And instead of constantly criticizing, let's say, the younger generation or criticizing differences, it's learning how to relate to those things, learning how to understand and truly care about other human beings for who they are and what they bring to the table, not what title or what clout or what all those things. It's like, what can we acknowledge and recognize and learn from each other and emotionally connect with each other in a true, authentic, transparent way, I guess. That's a whole lot of words. And
I love it. And here's one of the things here, when you're describing that and you're saying, hey, you need to be able to understand and relate to people. My background is a lot of sales. And there's one of those things, and this is what I'm taking from what you're sharing. When we sit down to talk to people, so often we sit across the table from them. right?
Mhm.
So we're taught that in business, right? We're taught that in sales. We're taught that, and okay, I'm going to sit down across the table so I can look you in the eye and I can relate to you. But what if, as sort of one of the things I'm taking from what you're saying is, get out and come around the other side of the table, see what it is that they see from where they're sitting, have
Yeah.
that conversation from a friendship side rather than just a business side, from a mentor side, maybe come around to the side of the table and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I'm sort of hearing you say, is because for us to be able to truly understand and relate to other individuals, and here's one of the other keys, and you didn't say this in so many words, though it is important. It's important to listen to understand rather than listen to respond. I think
Mhm.
there's a big difference. And I think oftentimes in our business environments, especially if you're the manager, you're the leader, you're the consultant, right? Emily's coming as a consultant. I'm supposed to be, she's like, and so everybody's looking to you. And so it's easy to fall in that trap of, well, okay, I'm going to listen so that I can formulate this really unique and awesome response, rather than listening to first understand where they're coming from, because your response could change based on that. Is that fair as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it takes a certain amount of humility to stop and not always have the answers, and to stop and not feel that pressure of having the answer. And as a
Yeah.
consultant, people want me to come in and wave the magic wand and make their environment more inclusive. And the bottom line is like, what does it look like for you? How do you want to get there? What resources do you have? And not just financially, but human resources as well, to actually roll out this plan and this idea of what you have. And what players do you have in place? Because we do need, I hate even saying the word, we need a variety, I'm going to say, of people to
Sure.
actually have perspectives to represent our consumers, our workforce, etc. Like, we can't just do it with the same people that look like us, think like us, act like us, move like us, vote like us. We need that variety. We need more than just one type of person in our workforce to be able to understand humans and to have that emotional intelligence.
Sure. Well, and I think too, it's easy to for any of us, whomever, whatever area of business you're in, we need more than, and this will be an old school saying, but we need more than quote unquote yes men, right? We need
Yeah.
people to challenge us. We need people to um, be able to say, hey, I see this a little bit differently. Have you considered this? Now, I do think, from a leadership perspective, that often once we've made that decision, it's important everybody get in behind whatever the decision is, and okay, well, we're all going to move in that direction.
Well, and
People
if
should
you've done your proper, if you've included those people in the process, there shouldn't be a problem getting people on board.
correct.
If you're that
Absolutely.
dictator at top that just says whatever you want and people have to fall in line, that's going to fall apart. But if you've actually included people in that process, it's not going to be hard to get people on board.
People get on board behind their own ideas. I think that's something we talk a lot about that on this show. Is it's like,
Yeah.
the more you include people from, and again, automotive background here, the one person in our automotive stores that knows what's happening more than anybody is our lot man. He's in every
Mhm.
area of the dealership. He's washing all the cars. He's moving these. Like, if you want to know how an auto dealership is run, you ask that guy, because he knows. He talks to the management. He talks to the sales. He talks to the mechanics. And so I think that's important to get that perspective, especially from individuals, in those different roles in the hierarchy, because then you do end up, it's not just, well, hey, it's my way or the highway. I think my way or the highway a lot, in business, again, time and a place. But I think for the most part, that left in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think, as time has gone on. Now, there is a time and a place when someone may have to say, hey, listen, we got to go this direction. I need everybody to get in behind me. However, I think it's important to acknowledge that if you've done your due diligence and you've taken the time to get perspectives, and I'll be moving all this direction, the other the other times, 90% of the time, that when you have to pull and move a different direction, everybody's going to trust you. Like that's one of the
Yeah.
foundations of leadership is that trust, right?
That trust. Yeah. Well, and you can say, we have to go in this direction. Like there's a lot of companies out there saying, this is what we have to do. Things are changing right now in our climate. This is what we have to do. Now, I need your help to figure out how we do it. And that how does not have to be determined by the higher up, but the higher up is saying, okay, this is what I am expected to do with whether it's funding or product or whatever the case may be. This is what we have to do in order to stay alive. I need your help to figure out how we get there and how we all get there together. And I think
Absolutely.
that buy-in and that trust and that transparency is huge in running a business.
Absolutely. So one thing I always get into the show and I start having these conversations and I forget. I put this on the screen a few times, but just in case, especially if you're listening on the audio podcast, there's a couple ways to connect with Emily. And then I've got a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
One is you can go to purryco.com, which is PURRYCO.com. She's got all her social links. I've seen some of her stuff. She does TikTok and YouTube. There's a lot of insight and sharing there. So make sure you can connect through her website that way. Also, if you'd like to connect more, personally, one-on-one, work on trying to recruit her into your business, work with her as a consultant, you can connect on LinkedIn, and that's linkedin.com/in/Emily Purry Speaker, and it's EMILYPURRYSPEAKER. So make sure if you want to connect more with Emily or with Purry Co. doing consulting or any other work, those are both excellent ways to reach out. So here's one thing I want to ask you. You brought this up earlier, is you were saying oftentimes you have these thoughts of, well, what if this happens and what if that happens or what if this, because you were talking about moving forward into the future versus focusing on the past. And we happen to be talking about vision at the time, but you were talking about, the what ifs.
Yeah.
What advice would you give somebody that might be listening to this show right now? How do you get through the what ifs?
Ooh. That's a big question. I think the most important thing, and this is very real for me right now. I was telling you before the show,
Yes.
we're not getting into politics at all, but with the reality of what's happening in our country is funding for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, however we want to rearrange those words, is being cut federally completely, which does affect state dollars, which does affect county dollars. So it's a trickle down. And so I right now am saying, what if there is no money to hire me? And it's a pretty decent reality that can happen. Now, disability is also sometimes included in diversity, equity, inclusion. Sometimes it's not, which is a positive and a negative. But also the ADA is potentially changing, and the laws and regulations are potentially changing. And so I'm still at potential risk and a pretty high risk. So there is a lot of what ifs, and it's scary. It's
Sure.
definitely frightening. I've been running my business for 5 years, doing this work for about 9. And I'm nervous. And so I think when it comes to the what ifs, it sounds a little wooey, but I'll go with it because I'm a little wooey.
I like woo woo.
Is we do have to acknowledge them. We can't live in the dark. I am acknowledging that laws, regulations, rules, funding are being cut very quickly for the things I do and for the people I represent. So I acknowledge those things and sit with them and kind of meditate on them in the sense of like, okay, I know that this list of things might be happening. I have a family. I'm a single mom. I have a mortgage. I have all these things that I have to take care of. So what is my plan? And so I am currently looking for direct employment, which is not awesome. And that is great because if the what ifs happen, I will have a job that's paying me to do a job. If the what ifs don't happen, I can continue to run my business on the side, or we get through the current changes and I can still run my business full time if that's the case. So I think you take the what ifs, you acknowledge them, you don't make any drastic decisions right away if you don't have to. If you have to, you separate those out and say, these are the things I have to change right now. Like I know a lot of companies are saying, with the international tariffs, I have to make some significant changes to budgets, to employees, to payroll right now, or we will go under. And so there are things that have to be dealt with right now. And so we acknowledge those. We put those, okay, those are our immediate concerns. Now, the what ifs that are potential problems, let's keep our eye on them. Let's keep them in our minds, but try not to get anxious and overwhelmed with them. And that takes a lot. Trust me, the anxiety
Sure.
comes quick and it comes fast. And we have to keep calm. I think as leaders, are the people that are watching us, whether you have 2 people, 10 people, or if you're just on social media, the people that are watching us are looking up to us to determine how they're going to act as well. And if we are acknowledging these things and maintaining our calm, yet transparent and honest perspectives, we're going to exude that, and people are going to see that and follow that. As leaders, that's what we have the capacity and the ability to do that. And so just like I'm staying and being very mindful of how I talk about politics, I'm not trying to put my opinions in it. I'm looking at facts. I'm trying to look at all the possibilities, and what plays out, and what doesn't. Hopefully I'll be prepared enough to, pay my bills and everybody around me that also need to pay their bills. And so I think it's taking that calm perspective and that not denying that it's happening, and then going from there.
I think there's a lot of insight in that answer. I pulled out a few things. I always sit here. I joke because I say that my audience knows the top of my head better than they probably know my face, because I sit here and take notes the whole time. I love one of the first things that you said. You said, "Don't live in the dark." You have to acknowledge the fear, and I think so often we spend time to avoid. Right? We spend time to run from that, and we go, oh well, fear, yeah, I don't want to acknowledge that, I want to stay away from that crap, that's terrible, I don't want to live in
That's
there.
uncomfortable. Run.
Yeah. So versus I remember going to a Tony Robbins event years and years ago, and he was talking about, you have to dance with the fear, right? If you embrace it and you dance with it, it has nowhere else to go. Like if you push back against fear, it pushes against you. If you embrace it and dance with it, then you have different ways to move and see around it and so forth. So I love the fact that you said don't live in the dark, and you need to acknowledge that. The other thing that you brought up, and I always sit and repeat stuff to make sure I have the comprehension, because I learned so much from my guests as well, Emily. I love this conversation. And you didn't say this specifically, however you shared all of the pieces of it, is that it's important we look for a contingency plan as leaders. You said you have to have that calm resiliency. You have to be certain of how you present yourself. People are going to be watching you. They're going to be following you. They're going to be seeing what you do. They're going to be emulating you. All the while, one of the things that's important is you have to develop what's the contingency plan. If we always only have one plan, and that was like you said, hey, I'm looking for other stuff. I can do this on the side. I can work through all these different spaces. Is that the ideal plan? Maybe, maybe not, but it's definitely the contingency plan. It's something that you've put real time and thought and effort into. And then you kind of closed there by saying it's important to have that calm perspective. And I relate that. I remember years ago I had a mentor. He used to tell me you have to be a duck. And then at the time I didn't understand it. Now I certainly do, right? But be a duck. It's where you have that calm, serene cut across the water on the surface, and underneath they're paddling like hell, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it is important, because somebody is always watching. You brought up several times, like you're a mom, right? You're a single mom. I think there's so much of leadership that graces the rest of our lives, our families, our businesses, our relationships, and so one of those things, on one side we look and we go, okay, well, I have to be able to lead myself, and I got to be able to lead this company. Also, you got to be aware your family, those, and you have boys, girls, it's all boys,
Both. 2 girls, 1 boy. Yep.
2 girls, 1 boy. So they're watching Emily to see, hey, what's mom's reaction? How do we handle this? How do we move? Because what they're seeing right now, it may be how they have to make that pivot and navigate through life later.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so often we get tied up in the sense that it's like we're in it, right? We are in it right now, and we're going, oh, I got to do this or I got to do that, and things change day to day, and that is the one constant is stuff changes.
Absolutely.
The world
Well, and
changes.
I
I'm
think it's
sorry, go ahead.
also there's that piece of transparency that I think is important in all relationships, whether that's leadership, families, and acknowledging, like, yes, I am stressed and these are the steps I'm taking.
Hmm.
I am worried and these are the steps I'm taking, because I think that's another piece of the emotional intelligence is we are not these leaders that aren't freaking human. We're scared too. We get nervous too. We get stressed too. It's not like we're superhuman, but it's how we react and communicate that to the people around us is super important, because there's nothing like someone, like, let's say my daughter is saying, I'm really worried about this, and I'm up here going, everything's fine, nothing's happening. Like, it builds that disconnection versus
Uh,
I'm like, yes, I am also stressed, and this is what we're going to do about it, and this is how we're going to handle this, and I am going to need your help. I'm going to need you to, on board for this and this. And I think it's the same in employee relationships, coworker relations, doesn't matter what. That transparency, but again, keeping that calm.
Absolutely. I picked up on something else here. The way you speak, and I want to share this because you may or may not know this, and I think it's
I'm a
freaking
little
awesome.
scared.
So, what's that?
I said I'm a little scared. Yes.
Don't be scared, and you can play on your degree in psychology for this. And I
Okay.
want to point this out to people. One of the things that Emily has said consistently throughout the show is and. She does not use but. It's
Okay.
and versus but. She says, yes, I'm worried, and here's how we're going to deal with it. Not, I'm worried, but here's how we're going to deal with it. The reason that that's so important for people that are in leadership roles, really good and resilient leaders will do that by nature. And the reason that I believe that's the case is because, yes, I'm acknowledging it's fearful, it's worrisome, things aren't going right. And, right, you're joining
Yeah.
it together, you're acknowledging it, you're accepting that piece, and you're moving forward. If you say but in your mind, you're trying to negate that thing. Oh, I'm worried, but oh, okay, well, it's not going to negate it for you. And I don't even know if you realize that you do that, but
Mm-mm.
I've picked up on it several times in the conversation. I literally just wrote it down. I got pages of notes here, but I wrote that down because I was like, wow, that's one of those things that it just shows that's the contingency piece there. And that is something, to me, it's so small. And if people aren't really paying attention, you'll miss it. That shows a lot of strength in somebody that's a leader.
That's
So I
awesome.
want to compliment you on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So as we're actually kind of coming to the tail end here, we're 40 minutes in. Do you
Yep.
have any final thoughts, Emily, that you'd like to take us out with today? And thank you for sharing your wisdom. Man, I'm so appreciative that we got together and got to have this conversation.
No, this is great. It gets me excited. I think the thing I am trying to instill in anyone around me and my kids and anybody, any of my friends, anybody I come in contact with, is transparency and honesty and letting down our guards and being more human. And maybe I've learned that because of my disability. Like, I only can hide it so much. I only can keep it from so many people.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, this is who I am. And I have to work on that every day, that acceptance again of self, of like, yes, there are things I can't do, which makes me very angry and frustrated at times. But I'm I'm okay. I'm living my life. I'm a surfer. I have kids. I have, a house. I own my own business. I've worked for people. I'm okay. I don't need to be like everyone else. And I think so much of leadership in our generation
Hmm.
is trying to be like everyone else, either our mentors who are older or what the books say we're supposed to be. There's so many pieces of wisdom we can take from that. But who are you? And I think when we can figure that out, we'll lead teams like that, and we will lead successful businesses that have good, honest people that attract good, honest people to us in our businesses. And finding authentic, real, honest leaders can be challenging to network with, to be around, to influence you, and to, you know, share the influence between each other and really grow. And so I really encourage that of all leaders listening. And, you know, going through that self-exploration process can be hard, really hard.
Yes.
And it's an ongoing thing forever. I don't think there's ever an end to that journey, but it's so important as leaders. And I hope we can change the culture of leadership through that. So
love that. Emily, I appreciate you. A couple reminders again for everybody. Check out purryco.com, PURRYCO.com. Connect with Emily on LinkedIn. If you look her up, Emily, EMILY, Purry, PURRY on LinkedIn, you can connect with her one-on-one. Like I said, she's got, and she said she's got some opportunities maybe to work within a business. She does consulting, speaking, just an amazing woman. I really, really appreciate your time and your perspective today. If you would just hang out for a minute, and I'm going to take us out. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So ladies and gentlemen, that's going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit with my new friend, Emily Purry. Absolutely phenomenal. Just shared a lot of insight and wisdom and some different perspective. I remind you, one of the things I take out of here, or I took a bunch out of here, but one, come around to the other side of the table, see what other people see. I think it's worth it. It'll help grow yourself. It'll grow the people that are around you. It'll get some trust and some buy-in. So just really, really good show today. I really appreciate that. Do me a favor, for everybody that is watching or listening, please make sure and share this show. Share it with somebody that could need to hear this message. I think that's one of the biggest ways we make impact. You know, throw some thumbs up and some likes, and I love all that stuff. That's an opportunity for the show to grow. However, do make sure to share it with someone that needs to hear the message. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Leadership Toolkit. Until we speak next, stay great, everybody. We'll talk soon.